Today's the day that the Vikings get their quarterback of the future. Probably.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who do come around and listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all so very much. And thank you everybody here who is new, who's popping in on draft day, trying to see what's going on. Welcome in. My name is Luke. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search it out on any app like the SiriusXM app or anywhere else you listen to podcasts, including YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. The twist on the classic Monopoly game, now available on your phone and with all kinds of new ways for you to destroy your friends and loved ones. It's free on the App Store or Google Play. Just search out Monopoly Go. So, welcome to draft day. We're here. We made it. And it's pretty gosh darn likely that one way or another, the Vikings are going to have a new quarterback by the end of by the time you go to sleep tonight. There is a world where that doesn't happen. We'll talk about it. It's not guaranteed. And hey, that's the way you live in the NFL, right? Very few things in the NFL get to be guaranteed. If you are interested in the trade-up candidates, this is what the Vikings are trying to do. If you've been like living under a rock, you haven't been paying attention at all, I'll catch you up real quick. The Vikings are going to try really, really hard to trade up. They're very motivated and they're very well equipped. They made a trade earlier in the offseason with the Texans. They got 2 first-round picks at the ready to package and move up for a quarterback, and they're probably willing to give up more than just those. So they're going to try, and we'll see who moves off the pick. We'll see who they're willing to move off the pick with, and you know what other teams like the Giants, Broncos, Raiders are willing to do to throw a wrench in things. But that's the goal, and the quarterbacks that they would trade up for are what we talked about on yesterday's show. So if you're just interested in that, go check out that one, then come back to this one. You do a little cram for exams. Listen to an hour of Locked On Vikings. You'll be good to go. But today I want to talk about the guys that will probably be there at 11, and kind of the what if they don't make it dudes. And let's talk about actual draft targets at 11. Maybe call it the surprise candidates. So I want to get into a couple of the quarterbacks. We don't need to talk a lot about Caleb Williams here. I did do an entire podcast on him earlier in the offseason. You can check that out if you're like a Bears fan, or if you just are like a huge hater and you just want to see like what we can start, making fun of him for. Super valid, super get it. You can go check that out. But I want to talk today about Michael Penix and Bo Nix and kind of give you the evaluations that I did on them when I initially watched them. This is just one guy's opinion and all that, but I'll share that with you, and then some D-line stuff as well. There's always the world where they go defense. They just sit and they say, quarterback is quarterback. We don't want to overspend, and there's all this defensive talent. Let's go take a blue chip player and we'll see what we can do at 23, right? So guys available at 11, but let's start with Michael Penix, because I think he's the guy that has gotten the most discussion. He's probably the guy that shows up the most in like mock drafts as the guy the Vikings would take if they stick at 11. And mock drafts are interesting because a lot of people will write their mock draft, but they won't do trades in it, which means the Vikings get stuck with a bad quarterback, or you need to do something insane like have Drake May fall to 11, which won't happen. Like that makes the mock draft feel a little bit weird for us as Vikings fans because we sort of expect this trade up. But in the world where the Vikings get left out to dry and they're stuck and they're on the clock at 11, all of the top 4 quarterbacks are off the board. If they're going to take a QB, the next best guy, at least in my opinion, is Mike Penix. He's my 5th guy on the board. Now, personally, I don't really see him as a first round guy. But if that's what they're going to do, that could be an option. So let me talk to you about what I see in this guy. So if you watch any Washington University football, over the course of the season, you probably saw a lot of deep heaves, a lot of big Rome Odunze plays, a very explosive offense. You get a lot of volume stats that way. You get a lot of, ADOT that way, like good fantasy stats. And that's the way that offense was designed. And so when I flipped it on and watched it, and I'll be full disclosure, I covered the NFL. I'm not a college football guy really that much. I watch it on Saturdays a little bit, but it's very casual. I'm not evaluating. And so when I flip this on, I'm going in fairly blind, and maybe I've got an expectation based on like what I've seen people talking about on Twitter, right? Like, a lot of people talked about Caleb Williams. I kind of expect to see good, cool things, right? And so with Penix, I didn't really have a lot of expectation one way or another. I'd seen some mixed things, didn't really internalize them, so I was able to go in fairly blind. And what I saw was a connection between a quarterback and a wide receiver being the backbone of the offense. And that's an interesting, like, how do you evaluate that, right? And like, I think the backbone of the Vikings offense in the last couple of years was the connection between Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. Like, that was the offense. It was no longer a Dalvin Cook thing. That was Zimmer era where it was like a run game kind of deal with some shot plays. No, this was, if Kirk and JJ are on, this offense is unstoppable, and that's the backbone of the whole thing. If you stop that, then they got to go into their plans B's and C's, right? And I got a really similar vibe from Washington, which means, hey, you give Michael Penix, Justin Jefferson, you can go do the same thing. You can start to sort of see and like craft a vision there. But ball placement is a really interesting thing to hear people talk about and like evaluate, because I think there is a subjectivity to it that's a little bit uncomfortable to talk about in terms of where a ball should be. Should a wide receiver adjust or not? Should he have to adjust or not? Did he have to throw it away from that defender and make him do a weird adjustment on the back shoulder? Or was that an overly cautious thing to do? Or was he not trying to do that and he just missed? What was he trying to do? Where was he trying to put it? Can we guess? Can we know? It's difficult. And so for me, I see, when I saw the deep balls, I saw a lot of throws that were just, my guy's better than your guy. And I'm just going to throw it up and I know he's going to come down with it. But when you see deep balls, you want to see it maximize the guy. And you want to see it lead that player away from defenders instead of making them work through defenders, like work outside through a defender with outside leverage, right? If you see a defender with outside leverage, you can't throw that ball outside. If you see a defender in trail position, that means like leveraged kind of behind him, you can't underthrow it, right? You got to overthrow it. And, if you're going to miss long, make him run it down. So there's a difference to me between throwing a ball and kind of trusting your receiver to chase it down because you're throwing it away from defenders and there's a motivation behind it, and then just kind of making it hard and then your receiver bails you out, right? In the first case, your receiver's not bailing you out. You're using his talent to get maximum efficiency. That's maximizing that talent, right? You're saying, I trust you to do this. I trust that I can make it harder on you to make it impossible for the defender. I'm using that as a resource almost. And getting bailed out is, well, it kind of brought the defender back into the play, and you had to work through him. You had to win a contested catch. Another one was Drake London at USC. This was before Caleb Williams got there, but it was Drake London. It had a lot of that, right? And it created this whole discourse about like if he could get open or not. But with Rome, he was winning. He was getting open, coming back into coverage, and then winning those. And to me, that means Penix was inaccurate. You don't have to take my word for it. If you want to go with like PFF's charting, they had him as the probably second least accurate QB in the whole, in like the top 6 quarterbacks, the 6 that I'll be talking about here. The only one that was less was Drake May, who's throwing on the run all the time. And actually threw off platform, I think, more than he would like throw in, or he was more accurate off platform than he was in the pocket, at least according to, I think it was Ben Solak who charted that. Interesting stuff. But he missed a lot. So that's the characterization. I really wanted to kind of talk about that philosophically. If you haven't been around on Locked On Vikings, this is probably the thing that has been most argumentative. The most controversial take I have is like not liking this guy. I think a lot of people really love it. And maybe, I don't know. I hope it's not that it's just he's the guy it feels like we're going to get at 11, so you're like pre-coping with it. Like, come up with a take. But I think a lot of it too is just good stats and you kind of just run with that. But I don't know how much of those good stats were driven by him versus driven by Odunze. And with the inaccuracies, there's a few biomechanical issues. He doesn't step forward into his throws as much as he steps up. Like he kind of gets vertical. He almost jumps into them a little bit. You can see his front foot slide back. That means his weight isn't shifting the way it should be, and his hips aren't coming through. And he's a little stiff about it. And for a guy that's injured his knees a couple times, like he's like a big medical concern, right? Now he's had a couple of healthy years in a row, so he's as healed as he's going to be, right? But you still are always going to have that extra risk of that injury re-aggravating. It's just kind of how knees work. But it also is going to limit your flexibility. You've got scar tissue in there. They've been operated on. And working through that flexibility is like, that's not exactly something that you can just lift a weight for. Like that's a really difficult thing to kind of reestablish. And so not having that rotational, I don't know if he ever gets the hip rotation that you want to become an accurate passer. That's where my concern with him lies, that I see inaccuracy, and I don't know if I see that inaccuracy getting better. The other thing is his arm angle comes out too wide. That's going to cause you to spray a whole bunch of them, although I saw it come up a little bit higher the way it's supposed to be at his pro day, which is the kind of thing that I'm looking for at pro days, is like mechanical stuff. Did you change the way you throw? Not necessarily if they can complete passes on air, right? Like that's not really that interesting to me. But I did see it, so for whatever it's worth, that was a thing. And then Penix, he ran like a 4.45, but he doesn't run. He's not a runner. He doesn't want to. And that's fine. That's your game, right? He wants to kind of, if there's pressure, he'll fade away from it and fling it up and, throw a deep ball or something, like try to make a hero play kind of off platform. He won't scramble and run and do that whole thing. So you kind of get a very Kirk Cousins-ish, like this dude's going to be a pocket passer. You are not going to have like an out of the pocket game. So if you liked a lot of years of Kirk Cousins, then you probably are going to be a little bit more okay with this. That's Penix in a nutshell to me. There's a lot that I left out. You can go listen to other things. You can go to patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL and get like a full breakdown with video and all that. But for now, let's move on to Nix and some of the other guys that the Vikings could end up with. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monopoly Go. The classic Monopoly board game is back, and it's right there on your phone. You can get all kinds of different fun versions, hundreds of Monopoly boards from Vegas to Camelot to there's like a moon-themed one. But crucially, you can play with your friends, charge them rent if they land on your properties, all that stuff, and you can also rob them. You can heist them. You can just take their money and you can wreck all their stuff with a literal wrecking ball. So if you loved the classic experience of Monopoly, just annihilating your loved ones and pounding them into a smoldering crater and a shell of their former selves, you can get Monopoly Go. You can download it free on the App Store and Google Play. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Not only do we have all kinds of awesome NFL draft props, over-unders on where people are going to go, who's the first pick. You can even get you can string together the first 3 or 5 picks. And if you get all of them right, you get pretty good odds there. You can also bet on the NBA or NHL playoffs. Those things are going on as well. Go gamble on a Timberwolves game. Right now, if you are new, you can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150, whether you win or lose in bonus bets. So you can bet on anything from slam dunks, 3-pointers, draft props, whatever you want. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started with that and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's move on to the Bo Nix part of this Locked On Vikings podcast. If you're interested in some live stuff, by the way, so we did... as you are listening to this, we either are about to or just did a live show on the Minnesota Football Party on Locked On Minnesota Sports. So you can go catch it live, come in the chat, ask questions, and we'll also be live for the first round. I will be on that until the Vikings pick. We'll do reactions to the pick, and then I'll jump and do some of the work I have to do for this show. But we'll be live for the whole first round. So come hang out with us because, to be honest, the NFL draft, the draft broadcasts kind of stink, and we're better. So go come hang out. Let's move on to Bo Nix. So Nix is a very polarizing prospect, and I'm going to be honest, I kind of don't get extreme opinions on him. It's fine. It's okay. Everything is okay. And there is this thing in sports discourse where nothing can ever just be okay. Nothing can be medium. It has to either be phenomenal or it sucks, or if you say mid, that means bad. When you say mid, you mean bad, right? I've never seen somebody be like, that dude's mid, and actually mean that that dude is medium, that there are some good things and some bad things and they balance. No, that you just mean bad, but you're just being like polite about it. But so when I say medium, I truly mean medium. There's stuff about Bo Nix that I like. There's stuff about Bo Nix that I really don't think works out. And there's too many things in the latter for me to like feel comfortable with him as a franchise quarterback. If he ends up being the guy for the Vikings, I'll be pretty upset about that. And I think the elephant in the room here is Bo Nix played on an offense that was like 80% Mickey Mouse nonsense. It was all one step drop, quick read, a lot of pre-snap reads. Very good at pre-snap reads. He did almost exclusively that, but it doesn't give you a great sense of him as a quarterback. And so again, if you were a fan of the Oregon Ducks and you had to sit down and watch that offense every time, you see this boring offense and you're going to think of Bo Nix as a boring quarterback. I don't know how much of that is on him and how much of that is just that was their plan. They wanted to do quick game. They wanted to get the ball out fast, get the ball in the hands of playmakers, whatever, right? So instead of trying to make a judgment on that, I just kind of cut those plays out and said, okay, we do have a few plays where, it's 3rd and 7. He's got to play real boy quarterback. How did those go? And let's evaluate him based on kind of those situations a little bit more. And I think the thing that stuck out to me the most, that alarmed me the most about Bo Nix, is how often the ball would come up short and how poorly how slow the ball would get there in situations where you really want to drive it. You want to put some zip on it. You're trying to, sneak it through a window between two linebackers, or it's a timing based, little hitch or something like that, where everything is supposed to go really quick in this Oregon offense. And sometimes the balls would float on him. And he does have a pretty good touchy pass, like that touchy, layery, feathery thing that I was talking about yesterday, that JJ McCarthy doesn't really do that. Bo Nix is kind of on the other side of that coin, where he has that touch ball, but he doesn't have that zip ball. And all of that kind of goes together. And I'm looking at it thinking, this is, again, you kind of have to guess a little bit. You have to, when you see, okay, he's putting like air under every single pass. Why would that be? Unless I get to go ask Bo Nix, which, like, hey, the team does, so they don't have to do this. But we, as fans, we have to just kind of ask, like, is that compensating for something? And with Nix, I do think that there's an arm strength issue. Like a genuine, I don't know if he meets the threshold of arm strength. And it's not, I don't think torque or mechanical. I think it's actually athletic. And he's doing everything he can to make up for that by being, a little bit more of a touchy, feathery sort of precision passer. But that ain't going to fly in the NFL, right? You get your quick outs picked off in the NFL if they float on you. You see that happen to backup quarterbacks all the time. So that, I'm concerned. But I like the way his brain works pre-snap. With all these older quarterbacks, Penix is the same way. This is what I ran out of time, didn't talk about with Penix, but I always want to mention with him too. I love the way that Penix reads the field. I like the way that Bo Nix reads the field, even though a lot of his were like pre-snap pick aside, which means his post-snap read would be a half-field read. It's like hard to call that a half-field read because you do have access to both sides of the field. You don't have like a limited offense. You just are pre-snap. You're going, okay, this corner's leverage is like this. This is where the numbers are. You're making determinations, and then you're picking which half of the field is more advantageous. And I think that like cognition wise, like that'll play. We want to teach you the way we read things, and that's going to take time and all that. But like, I know you can think. Is I guess what it is. He's not really interested with his response to pressure. I don't really like it. He's not really interested in rescuing a pocket. He's either going to do a scramble drill, which is fine if it's to the right. He doesn't really have the on-the-move throw to the left very consistently, which is a different mechanic. So it actually is like when you're going non-dominant side, it's a different thing. But he's not ever looking to like save the pocket. He's either standing there or he's taking off and scrambling. There is kind of, it's 0 to 100 way too quick. And that's going to limit your flexibility in terms of pressure responses that you have access to. But otherwise it's like, I could sit here and talk about all these tiny little things. Yeah. Like I don't think his arm strength is that great, but he can get air under it. So he can get a deep ball there. Like he can make those throws. They might just be a little slow, and He can scramble, but he doesn't really have that like pocket management thing like this. It's like he's got partially that issue that his pressure response is good, partially it isn't. Partially his deep ball is good, partially it isn't. And so there's nothing to me about Bo Nix that's like, bam, that's the thing that's your identity as that's the thing that's awesome that he does, that you're really excited about. Like there's everything has a caveat with him. And that's why I think, okay, medium. Like my brain just goes to medium. And so I don't think you take medium in the first round just because it's a quarterback. I don't know if you take medium in the second round just because it's a quarterback. I think this guy is perfectly suited to compete with Zach Wilson and not win that competition in Denver. Like that's the way it feels like to me. So I'm not a big Bo Nix guy. I don't think that he would be the future of the Vikings. I don't see that guy hoisting the Lombardi anytime soon. There's just too many things, just too many problems. But it's not just quarterbacks that could happen at 11. I mean, there are, weird corner cases where we got to talk about another quarterback that I haven't gone over much, like Spencer Rattler or somebody like Michael Pratt or Jordan Travis, something like that. Haven't really gone over those guys. But what if they just go defense? Let's talk about a few of those guys. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's draft prep episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And what a wonderful sponsor to have for a draft episode, because it is all about finding candidates and scouting and evaluating them, right? LinkedIn isn't just like a job board, though. They help you hire professionals that are right for you and your company and the unique challenges and requirements that you have. No business is built the same. Everybody's a snowflake. And LinkedIn understands that and wants to make sure that you can kind of customize your experience and what you're looking for to fit your needs. That's why they have all kinds of really great tools, like something that can help you write job descriptions and edit them and optimize them, as well as screening tools to help you narrow down a very large portion of very large pile of candidates. And you will get a very large pile of candidates. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of posting their jobs. And over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. They're just on LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn and hire professionals like a professional. You can post your job for free if you go to linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so I want to rapid fire through a bunch of names here for this last part of the Locked On Vikings podcast, and they're going to all be defensive linemen. It is not a guarantee that the Vikings that go D-line at 11 and 23 or anything like that. There's probably a corner in there somewhere, or, it might be like a D lineman and then like Bo Nix or something like that. Like that could happen if they do keep these and they don't do the trade up. But personally, I focused on D-line. That was kind of a personal journey for me, just trying to learn the position better, and I do feel like I learned quite a bit. So there's a lot more guys than what I'll come up with on the podcast. You can find them at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. A lot of day 3 guys that I kind of did quicker hits on. But I'll give you what I'll say are the top 6 D-line. We'll try to whip through them quick. And then if there's time, I'll go over a couple of day 3 guys that I actually like, but we will also have time to talk about those guys too, assuming they're still on the board after, Thursday and Friday. Maybe we'll do a little preview too. So here's my guy. It's Chop Robinson. I love Chop Robinson quite a bit. I've been howling about him, screeching about him like a madman for the entire draft process, because to me, and what I've learned in kind of the journey of trying to learn the position better is that this is a position for warriors. This is not really a position for role players. There is role playing on D-line, and it is important, and it's dirty work and there's honor in it. But when you're talking first round, you don't want to get a guy that just kind of can do the job. You need a guy that breaks things open. And that's what Chop Robinson does. He wins with get off a lot, but he's not timing snaps. And it's really important to distinguish that he's not just kind of learning the snap count, which is a skill, but it's really important to see what you're looking at here. It's just the athleticism that he gets off the ball with. He tested with elite athleticism as well. So you can kind of expect that he'll be more athletic than NFL guys too. Like that's what the testing is for. But it's also, there's more nuance and detail to his game than he remotely gets credit for. And the idea that he's a bad run defender is one that I just actually vehemently disagree with. Everybody says he's a bad run defender, and I just think that everyone's wrong on that. I'm right. I'm sorry. That's where I'm at on that. So I just don't agree about that flaw. I think he can like hammer a puller really well. That's the one where you see a pulling guard come, you get down on one shoulder and you try to hit him. and you try to kind of break down their momentum. He does that really well, despite being outsized in that a lot of the time. You couldn't tell if just by watching what happens on those plays. He can shock and shed very well. He gets a lot of knockback. This is what he does. When he gets off the ball, not only does he get off with speed, but he gets off powerfully. There's explosion to that. That's athleticism. And you can see him shock the pads. You get your arms into a guy's pads and they get knocked back. You've got control of that guy now, even if he's huge, even if he's bigger than you. And now he's the one who's kind of playing on his heels, and you get to do whatever you want. If you want to yank him down and shed, you can do that. If you want to like rip and shed or swim and shed, you can do that. If you're pass rushing, you want to transition to another move, you can do that. So there's all kinds of plays where he just like knifes in, especially when it's time to slash. Penn State had him backdoor a lot against zone action. I would take that directly into the NFL. I think that's a great way to counter some zone. And you just got a DN that lives in the backfield. That's a premier defender. That dude should go top 10 in my opinion. And I get, because there's 4 quarterbacks and there's the receivers and stuff. There won't be a lot of defenders in the top 10 at all. But he's my number one, and that's a scorching hot take. And I don't care. You can cry about it. Next up to me is Laiatu Latu. This is a much more responsible player to pick. This guy, he just does a lot of stuff right, and there's a versatility. There's an all around to him that is very appealing. You can put him in any, you need him to do dirty work, he can do that. But if you need him to like be the guy, he has a cross chop. That's kind of his go-to move. Or like a scissor step, I guess some people will call it, the kind of, leaping, knock the hands down, imagine Unique Ngakoue, that move. I think it was Ojulari, Aziz Ojulari, who came out a couple years ago, that was doing that a lot too. Like some guys, it's just their go-to, right? And that's fine. That's his move. I think that rebuilding his pass rush strategy to utilize his power a little bit more could be a good idea in the NFL. But obviously, when you try to like rebuild a guy that's got a good game, you kind of risk building something worse or ruining him entirely, right? So if that doesn't happen, then I certainly would get it. But I think what you want to think of when you think of Latu is just guy does everything right. Another guy with some very good habits is Dallas Turner. And it's a fine line for me between him and Laiatu Latu. If you think that should be on the other direction, which I think is what consensus says, I wouldn't argue with you. But for him, the difference between strength and leverage is very apparent. He's powerful enough, and he can shock the pads and get control of a guy. I love that. But he's a leverage winner. He will out leverage, keep your feet moving, drive, and he can win against a guy that's bigger than him. But there are some times where he just gets brick walled, and you just kind of have to, put up with that. And then in terms of the pass rush, I think that there are the seeds of something really incredible, and it does flash a lot. You'll find some really, really cool highlights. But the L's that he takes in the pass rush, I think, are because he's rushing it a little bit, and he's trying to kind of get into brass tacks a little bit too much without actually setting stuff up. And so they're like, if a tackle isn't going to take the bait from him, that tackle gets to just destroy him. And there's some ugly L's on his tape that happen from there. It's a little bit less complete than Latu, and that's why I have Latu above him. But a lot of smart people agree with me, so don't go taking that to the bank. And then there's also Jared Verse, who is kind of the other like first round edge that people talk about. I'm not as big a fan of his. He is a powerful, powerful player that for whatever reason, after the first game of the season, Florida State just decided that you're not going to bull rush anymore. And I don't get it at all. I would have him go right back to that bull rush and then the hezzy bull rush where you kind of get off the ball, you give it a little head fake, then you bull rush just to kind of get them to flash their arms or get them to sort of stop moving their feet and hope you can get a win that way. Get them to try to like turn their shoulder angle or whatever. He's also a very deliberate player when he pass rushes. And a lot of this too is, when you're in the ACC, you play a lot of read option guys. So you have to play a little bit more passively and you have to have eyes on the QB and all this, you have to play contain and all this stuff. So it's not as fun to watch that kind of tape. But even in times when it is just ears back pass rush, he's like really deliberate about the way he tries to time things out. And then sometimes it just means that the rep doesn't get finished because he's just like waiting too long. It's like you just got to go attack. And this is why I say to me, D-line is for warriors, not for it's for monsters, not technicians necessarily. But But I do want to talk about the D tackles a little bit too. There's two that I think are pretty often mocked in the first round. One is Johnny Newton, who most people have really high. He's your classic three tech pass rusher, blow things up on the inside kind of guy, penetrator. He'll get washed down the river a couple of times. He's also dealing with a fractured foot that he is fully healed from. He did his pro day and everything. He tested well, so should be past it, but whatever medical concerns teams have, that could push him down the board. And then you have Byron Murphy, who plays at Texas, who is played nose tackle, can be a 3-tech. He's very small, but he has, again, a good understanding of technique and leverage to win those reps in a way that translates really well to the NFL, in a way that you teach everybody at the NFL. So he's a really polished player. He's actually my favorite D tackle. I think I have him over Newton because I think he holds his water a little bit better when it comes to like holding up to doubles, especially. Really good at taking on doubles. Don't care that he's 300 pounds. He's better than Tavondre Sweat at it. And Tavondre Sweat is the tackle next to him is 360. That's kind of the funny story of Texas to me. So those are the guys. A couple of names just to throw a couple day 3 names out for you that I like. I like Joan Briggs out of Cincinnati, and I like Xavier Thomas, the edge rusher out of Clemson. Maybe I'll talk about them more later. But for now, this is it. All right, this is the last time we're going to talk before the Vikings have their quarterback. So go check out the Minnesota Football Party. I'll be live there. You can come hang out in the chat. We can all live react together to whatever crazy stuff happens. Drink water. I love you. See you on the other side.